All right, guys. Hello, hello. Welcome back. We are here live, and I am just going to check over on the Facebook page. Now, if you are catching this on the replay, we're there. Yay. Please comment in the comments below because I will be coming back to this and responding where I see you guys. So even if you didn't make it live, as you know, you can always join the conversation and participate that way. Now, let me just come in here and see who has joined us. I want to know. Whoops, let me just mute myself. Lori Sweet is first in the house. Hello, Lori. Is Sylvia with you tonight? I want to know, guys, where are you logging in from? What's the weather like, and what is in your glass tonight? As you know, I'm Natalie MacLean, and we join together here every second Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern to talk about some of the most interesting, some hotly debated topics in the wine world. Tonight is no exception. Hello, Adele. Tonight, here's what's on the agenda. So as it says above me, we're going to be talking about aphrodisiac wine pairings from chocolate to oysters. We're going to get you warmed up for Valentine's Day. And then we're going to talk about what do they mean when they say, oh, this wine is salty? Is there really salt in wine, or is that just a metaphor? And then finally, we're going to take a look at granite soils. What impact do they have on the vines and therefore the wines we taste? Soil is very important when it comes to wine styles. So if you've got a wine that has come from vines and granite soil, should you be looking for that one? Is it to your personal style? All right, Douglas is here. Hello, Douglas, how are you? So guys, if you're just joining us, please post in the comments so I know you're here. Take a moment to like this page and share this video, please. That's the way you'll be notified. I'm probably not going to schedule these from now on. We'll always be live at 7 p.m. Eastern every second Wednesday, but the scheduling mechanism just doesn't work that great. So if you click on like right now, you'll get notified within Facebook that I'm live. You don't want to miss that, do you? So, Lori, Silvio is there too. Cold, clear night in Kingston. All right then. And Adele, Douglas, what's it like where you are and what's in your glass? I'm drinking a lovely rosé from Gérard Bertrand, southern France. I don't know if you've seen the bottle, but it has the etched rose in glass on the base of the bottle itself. It's so beautiful. You can use it as a water decanter when you're done. All right, let's dive in, shall we? Let's turn to our first topic tonight, and that is aphrodisiac wines. Now, you might not have thought about aphrodisiac food and wine pairings, but it's been on my mind a lot lately. And I think most wines are aphrodisiacs in themselves, but there are certain foods that we tend to associate as aphrodisiac foods. And so that's what I'm looking at tonight and which wines go with them. Welcome, Janet. All right, guys, so I am going to refer to some of my notes first. I'm going to give you some beautiful vineyards to look at, but I'm still got my eye on the comments too. So keep commenting in there, but I'm going to give you some good meaty stuff to for us to discuss. All right, so here we go. And does anyone have a favorite aphrodisiac food, first of all? All right. Hello, Janet. So I think that I hope this whole thing sparks a passionate debate, if you will, because we're going to be matching libido-lifting dishes with different wine types to stimulate your senses. Now, I believe that romance starts in the kitchen or even in the wine cellar before you get to the bedroom. And the first rule is to pair the wine you love with yourself, because there's no sense in finding a perfect wine for oysters if you don't like it. And as always, when I talk about food and wine pairing, these are just guidelines. I don't call them ever hard and fast rules, but I think of it as the marriage of different ingredients. So just as you might take a chocolate cake and put a swirl of raspberry in it. Those flavors go so beautifully together. Think about that when we're marrying food and wine. Now, on to some fun historical facts. Many ingredients have historically been considered aphrodisiacs, sometimes because the food physically resembled male private parts, like avocados, which is according to the Aztecs, by the way, they grew on testicle trees. And their female counterparts, oysters and figs. Other foods, such as chili peppers, provoked a fiery passion of love with the increased heartbeat and sweating. And yet, other foods contain certain minerals that increase energy, stamina, and blood flow throughout the body as well as to vital organs. An example of that is ginkgo biloba. Am I saying that correctly? Ginkgo biloba. So let's talk about 8 matches, and let's start with oysters. Let me give you some lovely food to look at. And again, if you're just joining us, please log in or comment. Just say where you're logging in from, what's in your glass, or which wine have you tasted lately. So, starting with oysters. The ancient Romans called oysters an aphrodisiac based on promiscuous women gulping down lots of them. But then again, the ancient Romans also thought that turnips were in the same category, so I'm not sure how much we can trust their guidance. Casanova, that 18th century Venetian lover, ate 40 oysters a day for breakfast with his mistress in the bathtub built for 2. Now, oysters have vital minerals such as copper, iron, and zinc, all of which are essential for male fertility. So, let me bring it back to you guys. What do you think, or do you have a favorite pairing with oysters? Welcome, Melanie. Hello. Now, for me, my favorite pairing with oysters. Now, first of all, I should admit I don't like oysters. I've tried 1 or 2, but I find it's a textural thing. They're slimy and I don't know what it is. I've got to teach myself to like oysters, but I have had 1 or 2. And I think with their briny taste and sometimes not fishy taste, because we don't want oysters that are fishy and old, but with the briny, salty taste, I think a crisp white wine goes beautifully. The classic match, of course, is a Chablis, an unoaked Chardonnay from northern Burgundy, but equally well are sparkling wines, bubblies, whether it's champagne or sparkling wine from another region. Hello, Dorrit. Nice to see you here. And Yvonne has joined us. David Cruz is here. His favorite pairing is oysters and Premier Cru champagne. Very classy, David. Very classy. Elaine Bruce is here, and she's saying that Calgary is nice and warm at 0 degrees. You've been getting some major snowstorms, haven't you, Elaine? And I love creme brulee. Haven't found a great pairing for it. Oh, let's talk about that, Elaine. I'm very easily distracted, but creme brulee to me has a sort of a burnt butter or toffee flavor, and I mean that in a positive sense. So I would almost go with a sort of, it has to be a sweet wine, because the guideline is the dessert should be sweeter than the wine should be sweeter than the dessert. So creme brulee is not as intensely sweet as chocolate, but it's still got that lovely burnt butter toffee taste. And I would go with a Tokaj. That's the Hungarian sweet dessert wine. And it tastes like sort of apple pie. I just think that would be beautiful with creme brulee. But I would love to hear your suggestions. Elaine, others who are here, has anybody found a to die for wine pairing with creme brulee? Paul Hollander is here, most likely with Patty from Virginia. Marie Walsh has joined us. Welcome, Marie. A lot of my students are in the house tonight. Janet says, I actually like scotch with oysters. Now that's interesting, Janet. But I also like sparkling wines that have a taste of the sea, like ones from Nova Scotia. That's perfect. I grew up in Nova Scotia, and now that when I go home, I love trying the sparkling wines because we can't get a lot of them here in Ottawa. But Benjamin Bridge, Wolfville, and Lightfoot, Oh, there's so many. Who else is making spectacular? Anyway, add to my list here, guys, because I know some of you are big fans of Nova Scotia bubblies and wines. So yeah, with oysters then, I love David's suggestion of a Premier Cru Champagne. Uh, but if you're on a bit of a budget, then you must go to David's house and drink his champagne. But you can also get like a cava, which tends to be more earthy and dry than a prosecco. But proseccos will work. The Italian bubbly, cava is the Spanish wine, a Spanish bubbly. Our North American sparkling wines are terrific. Um, whether it's from California, Niagara, BC, or Nova Scotia. Elaine Bruce has joined us again. All right, so let's continue on to, and I want to know from you, is there an aphrodisiac food that we should be talking about tonight and pairing it? I've got 8 different ones tonight that I'm going to talk about. So, but I want to hear from you in the comments. And similarly, if you're watching this on the replay, please do comment. Take one moment to share this video with somebody else you know will enjoy it. And also tell them why you think they would enjoy it. All right, let's go on to the second food I have, pine nuts. Pine nuts, yeah, you might think that is unusual, but pine nuts, like oysters, are also high in zinc. They've been part of potions prescribed to the lovesick in the past, but they work just as well in pesto, in my opinion. And for me, a classic pairing with pine nuts, because it has sort of an herbal taste. I love a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, or Sauvignon Blanc from other regions like the Loire Valley, or of course like South Africa and others that produce it. But what about you? If you've got a pesto, which does have that herbally green taste, what do you like to match with that? So pine nuts is number 2. Ooh, Janet says chocolate dipped strawberries. Janet, chocolate's on my list, so we are going to talk about chocolate in all its wondrous forms. All right. Now, next up, number 3 is acai berry. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly, acai. It's the Brazilian acai berry, which has been called natural Viagra. The acai is the most concentrated botanical source of iron in the world. That's why a lot of people take it as a health food. It improves blood flow throughout the body. It tastes like chocolate and dark berries. Now, it comes in powder and capsules, but that's not very romantic. What are you going to do? Sit in front of the fireplace and break open some capsules or down a capsule with your wine? But because it has that dark berry and chocolate taste, my choice of pairing would be a full-bodied red, maybe with some mocha notes. So we're looking for some oak aging and or some very rich, flavorful, fleshy, ripe, dark plums and berries. So I'm thinking a Shiraz from Australia, a ripe Cabernet from California. Maybe you have some other suggestions. Not sure if you envision yourself sitting by the fire and popping acai berries into your mouth, but they are the natural Viagra, so I had to put it on the list. All right, let us move on to the next category. Next up is asparagus. Probably not top of your list for aphrodisiac foods, but these slender, long green stalks are best served lightly steamed while still firm and bathed in melting butter or hollandaise sauce. Now, doesn't that have your juices watering? So much so for me, I have to take another sip here. Now, asparagus, like a bad boyfriend, is tough on wine due to natural organic compounds that make the wine taste bitter. So when it comes to asparagus, I'm very much in the camp of pine nuts, and I would therefore go with a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc or a Gruner Veltliner. the famous zesty white wine of Austria, a Vinho Verde from northern Portugal. All of these are not oaked, or not very much, and they tend to be zesty, green, herbal, can handle asparagus, because if you put asparagus with a buttery Chardonnay, it's just going to clash. It can often make a wine taste sweeter than it is, because it has, now what is it, Cynar, which makes everything taste sweeter afterwards. Artichokes have this too, and mercaptans, which just wreck everything. So asparagus is a special challenge, but when you have a bridging ingredient like your melted butter or your hollandaise, that will widen your choices. I'd still go with a crisp white wine that's not oaked. How about you guys? What do you like when it comes to asparagus? Elaine says, I have some chocolate-covered acai. I think Brookfield Costco. Yeah, something like that. Dark and rich for that pairing. Yes, chocolate-covered acai. So acai already tastes like dark chocolate and dark berries. So you could go with the dark red wines I was talking about, Elaine, or you could go with like an Amarone in that category. And then you can start to go into late bottled vintage port, because that's going to give you those dark, really dark, fleshy, ripe flavors and some sweetness to handle the chocolate. Okay, let's move on. The next up, I have soft, creamy cheeses, such as Camembert and Brie. They ooze sensuality. I want to say that again. Ooze sensuality when they flow like lava over a crusty piece of baguette and coat every crevice of your mouth. So when it comes to soft cheese pairings, I think a buttery Chardonnay will work, especially if you like to layer your richness, rich on rich. Or you can try a Steely Riesling or a Sauvignon Blanc to cut right through the creamy richness of that Brie or Camembert. Again, I'd love to hear what you guys think. And let us move on to the next one, which is strawberries and whipped cream. Now here, shape and texture come into play. This dessert isn't as sweet and rich as chocolate, but it does require a medium to sweet wine that has some citrus notes. And Janet, I would go back to your chocolate-dipped strawberries would be in this category as well. So with this, I might try a ice wine. Because generally, I don't think ice wine is a sweet enough wine for a pure chocolate dessert or even a cheesecake. Those are just too rich for ice wine, which, by the way, usually only has about 10% alcohol. It just doesn't have that rich, unctuous, voluptuous texture that, say, a Sauterne would have, or a Hungarian Tokaj, tongue twister Tokaj, or of course a port. So with strawberries and whipped cream, the classic at Wimbledon, the tennis match, is champagne, but I'm just wondering if I just think that's a good way to kill your champagne. It's just too sweet. If you've got a bubbly with some sweetness, sure, but with strawberries, whipped cream, I go ice wine. I go an off dry to medium sweet Riesling, you know, like the German Spätlese. I think those might work. All right. David is back with his Premier Cru Champagne. Does anyone see a pattern here? Yes, David, we do. And we need to know where you live if you've got that Premier Cru Champagne chilled and waiting for us. Lynn Singleton has joined us. Hello, Lynn. So yeah, now let's get to chocolate, shall we? Let me tell you about chocolate. And Dave Head has joined us. Welcome, Dave. So Casanova, that 18th century womanizer, also loved chocolate in addition to his oysters. He drank a cup of hot chocolate every day. So chocolate ignites similar positive endorphins to being in love. They've studied this. So in the brain, when you eat chocolate, similar endorphins are released as when you're in love. Now, I think the wine match depends on the amount of sugar and milk solids in the chocolate. The less of these, i.e. dark chocolate, the drier the wine can be, like an Amarone. But the higher, also in dark chocolate, it has a higher concentration of cacao. But for milk chocolate that's sweeter and has more dairy and milk solids, I would go for a richer, sweeter dessert wine such as port. Passion fruit caramels blend both the sharpness of the fruit and toffee richness of the caramel. You might want to try a tawny port in that case. Now, of course, chocolate and wine pairing is a whole big topic in and of itself, because we've got all the way from dark chocolate, milk, white, and then chocolate mixed with different things like grenache or pralines, pecans, caramels, all the rest of it. So that deserves a course in and of itself. And speaking of courses, by the way, if any of you here have not taken my free online video wine class, the URL is right below here. Please pick a time and day that work for you. Join me on that, because I go over the 5 food and wine pairing mistakes that can ruin your dinner and how to fix them forever. So save yourself a spot on that, because we go into even more food and wine pairings. Peter Nielsen is here. Janet wants to join David and I for the Premier Cru Champagne. Janet says, could a sherry work with chocolate? Absolutely. So sherry, as you probably know, Janet, goes from completely bone dry, a fino, amontillado, and graduated up, just like Riesling does, to a full-on sweet sherry called a cream sherry. Now, some famous brands are Bailey's and others, but I would say the sweeter style of sherry is what you'd be looking at with chocolate, and I would love to pair a sweet sherry with chocolate that has some toffee or nuts, pralines, caramel, something like that. I think that would be a pretty to die for combination. Dave, greetings from Jamaica. Terrible wine, but good weather. You got to pick one or the other, Dave. We've got the terrible weather, but we have the good wine. So I hope you're enjoying yourself in Jamaica, Dave. Thank you for joining us. Are you on the beach? Melanie says, oh, Janet, tossed Pinot and a warm, gooey chocolate brownie is some of my favorite combo. Wow, that sounds good. Interesting. Okay, good. I don't have my glasses on, so I can't read all of the comments sometimes. Very vain. Actually, I'm not wearing them because they reflect the lights. I have bright lights in front of me so that you can see me, and this isn't wine tasting in the dark. All right, so, and can anyone guess? I would like some guesses before I go to my 8th and final aphrodisiac food, what it is. I'm going to take a sip of wine while I wait for the answers to come in. Throw something wild in there into the comments. Love that rosé. David says, Reciado from Veneto could be a good pairing with darker chocolate. Absolutely. So Reciado is in that family of repast wines like Amarone, and they're darker, they're richer. Reciado is even sweeter than Amarone. But yeah, that would be a great pairing, David. Not that Amarone is technically sweet, but it does taste sweet because it's so ripe, and you know, the grapes are dried on the straw mats before fermentation. Oh, we got some guesses coming in. So what is the 8th and final aphrodisiac food? Lynn Singleton says peaches. I like it, but no. Janet, lobster. I think I missed a bunch of things here, but I would love lobster. That is romantic, and it's kind of extra special and splashy, Janet. That's not it. But why don't we talk about pairings while you're throwing out these suggestions? With lobster, I would probably go with a crisp white wine. unless it's lobster and melting butter. Then you can start to venture into Chardonnay with some oak on it. Nova Scotia Tidal Bay with lobster, natural pairing. Lynn, on your peaches, what would I put with that? Probably an ice wine if they're fresh peaches, depending on how ripe and sweet they are and if you're putting anything else with them. Elaine Bruce says, my 8th and final aphrodisiac food should be Netflix. I guess you consume a lot of Netflix, Elaine. What would I pair with Netflix? Anything. Any wine goes with. Well, I guess it depends on what you're watching. Like if you're watching When Harry Met Sally, or something like that, a rom-com, then we could get into a whole other topic. All right, so here is my 8th and final aphrodisiac food. It is bacon. Yes, bacon. Bet you didn't think bacon was sexy, but the smell of the food can stimulate desire, as studies have shown. Smells of certain foods, not bacon, but they will increase blood flow to strategic areas. In men, that's pumpkin pie and lavender. And for women, curiously, it's cucumber and licorice. Conversely, those who lose their sense of smell also are found to have diminished sexual appetite. That is just very sad, in addition to not being able to smell wine. Now, bacon hasn't been scientifically proven to stimulate blood flow or sexual appetite, but I'm nominating it tonight as one of the most potent aphrodisiacs on the planet because I think there's nothing sexier in the morning when someone is cooking bacon for you and does the dishes afterwards. You just can't beat it. What do you guys think? So with bacon, I would pair it with a robust red wine. You often hear some red wines described with a meaty or bacon note. I'm thinking Rhone Valley Syrah. Could be an Australian Shiraz, little black pepper going on there. But I just think that would be such a great pairing between the two. What do you guys think? All right, are you surprised? I've shocked you all into silence with nominating bacon as an aphrodisiac. All right, guys. Please keep in the comments, and then I'm going to go on to the next topic, which is salt in wine. Now, have you guys ever heard someone say, oh, this wine has, there's a lot of salinity or salt in this wine? Yay, bacon. Right, Elaine. Yeah, but Elaine, so it's a breakfast food, but, it's the morning after, right? But also bacon can often be like an ingredient in many dishes, like bacon-wrapped scallops. That really helps scallops. Scallops then don't destroy wine as much as they would on their own. Scallops are among the toughest for wine pairings. All right, so let me get to salt in wine, the bizarre concept of salt in wine. So does salt, when we hear people talk about, or if in fact you have tasted salinity or salt in wine, where does that come from? So there's different theories. One is that salt comes from vines planted close to the ocean, that sort of briny breezes deposit sea salt on the grapes. But then, so do we then taste it in the wine the way we get a briny taste in oysters? Well, from my research, winemakers don't think that iodine can be absorbed through grape skins. Many winemakers, not everybody, of course, it's not a consensus, don't think that the iodine absorbed through grape skins would make its way past fermentation and then into the final wine, and that's what you'd be tasting. Another theory is that it comes from the water source for the wines. So what we're tasting or sensing is really the mineral content of the wine, much like the taste of whiskey is influenced by its water source. And another comparison would be mineral waters themselves. People have done tastings, people with too much time on their hands, I've done tastings of mineral waters side by side and can tell, or say they can, that one mineral water can taste distinctively different from others in the lineup. New York City even has a water sommelier at one of the Four Seasons. Rochelle O'Connor is here. Hello, Rochelle. Melanie says she's noticed salt in wine, especially in Riesling from Alsace. That's very interesting. Very interesting, Melanie. Why do you think that is? So, a third theory is that the salty taste comes from various layers in the soil where the vines have thrust their roots. Of course, too much salt in soil will prevent vines from growing in the first place, which is why they worry about that in certain regions of Australia where the water table has dropped or is drying up and the soils are becoming increasingly saline or salty. It's a danger to the vineyards, in addition to, of course, those horrible forest fires, wildfires that they're experiencing now. Just, they really don't need all of that compounding their efforts. That is such a sad situation right now. But I think perhaps we don't need to be so literal when we describe wine as having cherry flavors. We know that cherries aren't added to the wine. So I think maybe there's a parallel to be made there, that even though we may taste salt or feel like it has salinity, we know, or I don't think we need to expect that there's actual salt, of course, added to the wine. That'd be illegal. But also that the salt may be just a sensation or a texture that we're tasting, like the minerality of the wine. Janet says, I adore salinity in wine. Albarino wine from northwestern Spain as an example, or again, Nova Scotia wines. Very good point, Janet. You can, in fact, measure the degree of salinity in wine as you can for all liquids, even though that actually doesn't equate to how salty the wine may taste to you. That is a perception thing. We know that vines can absorb minerals, including salt, from the soil, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily passed on to the wine because, as you know, synthesizing different minerals and so on is an organic process. And what ends up in the grape, and then finally what ends up in the wine after fermentation, are different things. So I know that's not definitive, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about that concept of saltiness in wine because it can be confusing. My personal opinion is that the soils matter, and so do winemaking techniques that bring forward maybe more fruit, and therefore you're going to taste or perceive you taste less salt in the wine. But I do think in the end it's probably a taste perception, like we taste cherries, that is personal and subjective, and that it may be, for me personally, closer aligned to minerality in wine. So a texture thing, minerality and acidity. Acidity is in there too. So acidity, saltiness, and minerality. I think those three work together, and it's your interpretation of what you're getting, what you perceive, what your taste buds pick up, what's in your background as a taster is what's going to come through in the wine. All right, Tom Nolan is here. Hello, Tom. Elaine says, I love salty anything. Pairs well with my kryptonite chips. Oh, Elaine, that's my kryptonite as well. I got to tell you, bag of chips. I mean, I think there's people who are in the sweet camp and then the savory camp. So sweet is, chocolate, maybe ice cream and so on. And then savory is like, I love bacon too. That's why I nominated it. But chips and all manner of chips, Cheetos, popcorn. So anyway, guys, what is your favorite of all the pairings we discussed tonight, or pairings that came into the comments? What are your favorite pairings that we chatted about tonight? And what pairings are you going to be trying on Valentine's Day? Whether you're going out or staying in, or there's Galentine's Day too. Is that the day before, the day after Valentine's Day? I'm never quite sure. But how are you celebrating? Do you have a wine lined up, or haven't thought about it yet? I wanted to get this early enough into our live chat because these conversations get transformed into our podcasts. So I don't know if is anybody here a podcast listener? Do you listen to any podcasts? So podcasts, if you don't know, are online radio shows. That's the most relatable way that I can put it. I have a podcast called The Unreserved Wine Talk, and it's a lot of fun. So these chats get edited out for things that wouldn't translate on a podcast, like the checking in and the commenting and sharing and so on. But I will highlight people who make comments when I include them in the podcast, so you might want to listen for your name. But you can listen to a podcast when you're doing so many other things. This is fun because we get to interact in real time and there's a visual element. But with podcasts, the beauty of those is you can put your earbuds in and you can walk the dog, you can do the laundry, you can, if you're on your own, you don't even have to have earbuds. But you can do other things. You can multitask. You can be on the commute, listening to it in your car or in the bus or wherever. So thank you, Lori. I'm glad you like the podcast. Thank you so much. Janet says, I regularly listen to podcasts, including yours. Yay! Peter Nielsen. Lori. Hey, Elaine. That makes me feel like it's all worth it. So I alternate on the podcast. Podcasts are weekly. This is every second week. But I alternate on the podcast between one of these conversations edited down and an interview with somebody else. And as you know, I used to interview people on Facebook Live, but the technology just brought me to my knees. And especially if I was dealing with a guest who wasn't technically savvy or who was over in South Africa or Australia. I mean, it was just brutal. Like the bandwidth, the internet connection, then getting them to figure out how to log in, and then the time difference. Sometimes I'd be interviewing people and it'd be like 2 a.m. their time. That did not work. But so I'm kind of going through the interviews I used to do on Facebook, editing them into the podcast. But when I run out of those, I'm going to interview new people. So I'm open to suggestions. But I'll be interviewing them one-on-one on technology called Zoom, so that the bandwidth is good, but it won't be alive, but then I'll edit it and put it into the podcast. All right, Heather Proctor is here. Hello, Heather. All right, guys. Well, that went faster than I thought. And we didn't get to my third and final topic, but I'm going to save that for next week rather than rushing through it, because I am meeting with my course students. A lot of you are here. And we are meeting in the private Facebook group now for a nice tasting of 4 different wines, a guided, structured tasting at 1:45. So I actually really do have to wrap this up so that I can get over there for my students. As always, if you enjoyed this, click like, share this video. Even though it's at the end, just share it because someone can watch the replay. And if you haven't yet, join me in my free class, my online free class at nataliemaclean.com/class. We do even more food and wine pairing, and it's a lot of fun. So guys, I will see you again in 2 weeks' time. So I believe that's February 12th, 2 days before Valentine's Day. And I just love it. I thank you so much for joining me. This is so much fun. I absolutely love it. And I will talk to you again soon. Take care and bye for now. Keep commenting, by the way. I love it. Take care.